You're listening to Paris Undressed on Paris Underground Radio.
Welcome to Paris Undressed. I'm Kate Kim Griffin, your host and the author of Paris Undressed, The Secrets of French Lingerie. Every week, we go behind the seams of the lingerie capital of the world to explore femininity and sensuality. And if you listen carefully, tuning into both the conversation and the whispers of your body, you'll find joy, beauty, and delight. My guest today is Verity Balzan, a lingerie designer who has worked for leading brands such as Vanity Fair, Princesse and Simone Pérèle. Verity is passionate about fabrics and she creates an emotional experience for the wearer by combining fashion, design, and technical expertise. In today's conversation, we talk about the design process, why underwire gets such a bad rap, and how embroidery might just change how you feel in your lingerie. Oh, and we also talk about the color green and why it's such a beautiful way to add more color to your lingerie drawer. So make yourself a cup of tea and join us. Hello, Verity, and thank you so much for joining me today on Paris Undressed.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you for having me. I'm honoured to be here.
We have a friendship and a professional relationship for many years now, and I'm delighted to be able to share your expertise and how you influenced, perhaps you don't even know, my interpretation of lingerie when I was writing Paris Undressed. So we'll get to that, but our conversation back then has changed how I look at lingerie, how I feel about lingerie, and how I communicate that to consumers. So I'm eager to be able to share that with our listeners today. But before we get into all of that, I would just love to know, how did you end up in Paris?
Oh, actually, I grew up and studied in England. And I was lucky enough to study contour fashion. I discovered my passion for lingerie very young. And so I did a degree in contour fashion where I actually met a French girl from Paris, Beatrice Misistrano, who she came back to Paris to work when we graduated. And the company she went to work for, they were looking for other designers who had the same background as her. And at that time, working in the UK, I was working for a fabulous company specialising in large sizes, Burley, who I'd been sponsored by to do my degree. And but unfortunately, creative-wise, it wasn't very challenging. Colours and fabrics and styles tended to be very basic, with lots of white, black and skin colour, and occasionally we might have the chance to do a bit of red or green at Christmas. And I was at that age where I thought, I've got to do something. I thought, I can't stay here, as a young designer, you think, the world's your oyster, which is good in a way. So thanks to Beatrice, I actually found out there was a job going in Paris. So I applied, and I think I was pretty unconscious about what I was doing. I was just about to be 22 years old. So I thought, oh, let's go. I mean, I didn't really speak French or anything. And so I just came over. And that's how my life in Paris began.
And what was the job?
Oh, it was designer and pattern cutter, like technical designer as well, because working for Siltex. It was called Siltex at the time, which was part of the Vanity Fair group, along with variants, Naf Naf Lingerie, Silhouette. So I went to work for them, and it's now called Best Form. So, it's a brand that still exists and everything. It's gone through a few changes, as in the owners of the company and things. But no, a fabulous experience.
And you mentioned that you knew very early that you wanted to be a lingerie designer. How does one know that?
It's quite a funny story in the sense that actually I wanted to be a fashion designer. Obviously, most young girls, I think, when we start making clothes for, at the time, our Cindy dolls or our Barbies, we get our grandmother's sewing machines out and we start playing around with that, and we all want to be fashion designers. So I went to study fashion. It was like probably the equivalent of a bac pro. It's like a BTEC in fashion design in the UK. And in my second year, we were given the choice of doing a millinery project or a lingerie project. And the funny story is my grandfather was a hat manufacturer, and my mother had grown up in that world, and not necessarily, I mean, good memories, but it was like, you can't go into the hat business because a lot of my grandfather's family was in that business from where I came from. It was a very big town of hat manufacturers. So I thought, well, okay, I'll do something different. I'll do lingerie. And I had a revelation. It was absolutely amazing. Whereas I would be struggling sometimes for the outerwear projects to come up with sort of 50, 60 designs that they were asking me for. When I started doing this lingerie project, I can remember sitting in my bedroom and spending like a whole weekend designing, and I loved it. I loved it. And I think it was also discovering the different fabrics with the laces and the embroideries, and it being so interesting and probably new at the time as well. So that's how at 17 years old, I did that project, and it just went on from there.
And when you talk about designing in your room, is it cutting up pieces of fabric? Is it drawing? What does that involve?
Yeah, it was a little bit of all of it, really, because at that time I was drawing probably more, and you always do the drawing on the silhouettes and things like that. But it's funny, I quite often find now, especially in lingerie, drawing on a silhouette is not particularly practical for lingerie because there's such a technical side to the product. So when you're designing and creating something, and then you've got to give it to a technical team to be able to, for them to translate it and turn it into a product, you need to have that more technical side. So it's always, a little bit of a mix of the drawing, but also on the bust. There's nothing like getting the bust out and getting the fabrics and cutting them up and putting a bit of elastic here, a bit of ribbon there, and it's pinning it, and that's fabulous.
And bringing it to 3D or bringing
Oh,
it to,
definitely.
yeah. And so when you talk about drawing on a silhouette, do you mean drawing on paper or on a flat surface?
Yeah, drawing on paper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, flat design, but on a figure drawing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And you tossed in sewing pretty quickly in there, but how did you learn how to sew as a child? Was there a creative element of sewing in your family?
Oh, my grandmother. Yeah, my grandmother. She was always sewing, making us clothes and doing things for the house. And no, so, and it was, I suppose, it's sometimes what I say to my kids. It's like, we never had TV like they have
Mhm.
TV, that there's things on all the time and with so many channels today. So it was different, and I'm probably sounding really old now that I'm saying that. But we were looking for other things to do, so it was nice, as you would be cooking or be doing some sewing, so I was very lucky.
This transmission simply by just
Yeah.
being together in the same room without actually necessarily teaching anything, but just sort of picking it up. My mom was a very good seamstress too, but that didn't translate to me at all until much later, the curiosity. But I have very fond memories of the sound of the sewing machine whirling in the end, and her studio where she had the fabric cut out, and of course we celebrated Halloween and we always won first prize, and I just knew that mom would be able to just make something absolutely fabulous. So there was an appreciation and already a texture of the sewing, even if I didn't pick it up right away.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important, like you say, it's something, the transmission of, how can I say, of something creative that is so nice. And is you saying about the Halloween costumes, I can remember my grandmother making me my dance costumes because I used to do tap dancing. Loved it. I mean, I loved the sound of the tap dancing shoes and everything like that. And she used to make us these fabulous costumes with like satin and sequins and
Yeah. No, it was really magic. They created magic and we wore it with such pride
Yeah.
at the time. While you were already dressing Barbies and playing with pieces of fabric, what was your own relationship to your body and fashion for your body as a young Verity?
Well, actually, I think I don't really think I had sort of. I was quite happy with my body. It was never, something that I would sort of ask myself too many questions about. But I would quite often, when I was making clothes, obviously having made clothes for Barbie and Cindy dolls, because we were more Cindy dolls at the time. I and then it just moved on to me making clothes for myself and for my sisters as well. And I can remember we used to go to the market sometimes on a Saturday morning with our pocket money, and we'd buy a couple of meters of fabric, and we'd go home, and then I'd be telling them how to cut things out. We'd be making these tube skirts and these tops that probably they've just got sort of. It was just a big round neck and wide sleeves, and and we'd make them in all different colours and to go out in the evening.
Yeah, from a bolt of fabric in the morning to
Exactly.
wearable fashion in the
Yeah, I
evening.
mean,
Yeah.
they weren't very long-lasting clothes. I mean, it was like, but they did the job for a couple of weeks anyway.
And added some fun. And tell us about your first bra.
My first bra, I can remember. Now, actually, it was brought, I think, from either Littlewoods or British Home Stores, not Marks and Spencers, surprisingly enough, and white. It was probably molded with the sort of a little bit of a shine on the fabric, but it had like a rabbit sort of transfer print just on the side, because at that age, sort of, probably 12, 13. In that generation at that time, we were still into sort of I think quite sweet, cute looking things, and we definitely,
Quite innocent.
yeah, we weren't looking at the lace whatsoever. Lace was definitely corresponded to some more sexy lingerie, so it was quite plain. Yeah,
And fond memories?
I was very proud of it.
You were very proud of it. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so it was an important step in your young life being able to have and wear a bra.
Yeah, because when you go to sport, when you're at school and you have gym class, playing hockey and everything like that, and you used to have to get changed in the changing rooms, put your gym kit on. And obviously, I mean, I was at an all girls school. So I think there was a certain amount of freedom about when we used to get changed in, in the changing rooms. And everyone was looking at each other's bras and who was wearing one, who wasn't, and so it was. I have fond memories. It wasn't something I think that I dreaded, because I think some teenagers, that can be a part of their life where they dread having to get changed at school for in front of other people. But no, I was lucky to be surrounded by kind girls and fun girls. So we went through that all together.
Yeah, a supportive collective experience.
Yeah.
Creativity and inspiration as a designer, now, how do you absorb inspiration?
I think it's how do you absorb it? There's so many things that are inspiring. It's whether you're walking down the street and you see something somebody's wearing, or you see part of some architecture, or it might be just a question of light, the reflection on something. I don't know. I think it's just something that when you appreciate beautiful things, uh, and you're attracted to, I don't know, as I was saying, the play of light and the graphic effect sometimes that happens. Inspiration often, I find, comes from fabric and the embroidery and the laces, especially for lingerie. I mean, we're lucky enough to have some fabulous suppliers that are so creative. And I must admit, it's been difficult over the COVID period where we haven't actually been physically seeing the fabrics. It's all been online. So it's been great in the last sort of few months to get back to going to the fairs and seeing the suppliers and seeing the fabrics and actually touching them.
If you're enjoying this episode of Paris Undressed, you may also be interested in The Heart of You, hosted by spiritual guidance coach and tarot reader Annette Dalou, who explores the vast wonder of spiritual growth through intuition, divination, and unconditional love. Tune into this magical podcast. Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. Well, I've spoken about this in other podcasts, this discovery that I made within the lingerie industry, and having, run a lingerie company for 18 years, but always been on the marketing side. And when I discovered the fabric fairs, and I knew about lingerie designers and I knew many lingerie designers, but the way the industry's organized is, once the product's finished, that's one part of the fair, and the people that are actually making that product that's finished are off on another part. And just not really understanding why all the designers were just huddled around this table of what I thought was just scrappy pizza fabric. And you were all just, in complete euphoria and fingers touching all these different fabrics. And it was quite quiet in this part of the fair, whereas the other part were showing collections was with the music and the party and the champagne. And on this side, it was all very quiet, and there was this intensity to it that was intriguing for me. Can you describe what it is about fabric that pulls you in? I know it's instinctive for so many creatives, but for those of us who don't understand or feel it, you are just pulled to this material.
Yeah, because I think it's emotional. In fact, there's something that creates an emotion, whether it's the fact that you touch the fabrics, because in a way it's as if they're alive. When you work with fabrics and things, it's when you put it in one direction, it will do this. When you cut it in another direction, it will do that. They're versatile. And I think, don't forget, there's also the emotional side that is related to the colours. As we quite often say, colours create emotions and they represent emotions as well. So obviously that must trigger something for us. And then there's the texture and the touch, the feel. We quite often say that a fabric can be cold to the touch, it can be warm to the touch, it has depth, it's smooth. There's so much vocabulary that goes around fabrics. So that's why I think it creates so many emotions.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, that's really seems to be something that's instinctive to designers. And I have always considered designers and your artists. And I've, instead of a paintbrush or a pencil, you tend to use a needle to create your work. And understanding and then learning how, or paying attention to the touch sense, has changed my relationship to lingerie in how I feel it. And when I talk with women, and so it's something that you do so instinctively, but you're not ever really taught how to touch fabric or feel fabric, and that there is so much choice. And when you're designing, of course, bras and lingerie, there's the body and the shape that the fabric, as you say, has to fall the right way. And just what I guess I'm trying to get to is, we as women put on what we see on the rack and ultimately judge ourselves as a result of that, when in fact, it's all how it's been put together that will change how we actually feel about ourselves. And so it actually has nothing to do with us. It has to do with what we're putting on and how it's been conceived to fit or not fit us. Does that make sense?
That is so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's a really interesting way to look at things as well. And it's something that I think sometimes women, people in general, don't understand that so much. And that's why, as you can say, how people have the relationship with their own body. And sometimes it's to be able to accept that certain clothes, lingerie doesn't suit you, not because, as you say, it's your body, it's because it's the style or the fabric or the way it's been made doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work because behind all of it is a budget. So if
Yeah,
you, as Verity, as a designer, have been given free reign to do whatever you want, you will not produce the same thing when different, but all these things require choices. And the ultimate result is how something stretches or doesn't stretch or has that extra piece that needs it for me to feel a certain way. But it's just interesting how we ultimately, I know myself, I just judge me. Oh, this doesn't fit me because I am too something, and that too something is never a positive word. And in
yeah,
fact, when you understand the construction and what goes into making it, there's so many different choices and so much more than appreciation for how something's been made. And as I discovered, brings us to just sustainability, and that you make choices of things that you wear longer instead of this ultimate looking for that satisfaction of something that doesn't quite fit, and maybe this next one will do and I'll try that. And I find in the lingerie purchasing that is often a hurried experience because it takes time and we somehow get frustrated very quickly and demotivated. It's not a fun experience in a very tiny change room to be confronted with one's naked self 2 inches away and suddenly feel like it's all your fault. But once you've gone through just the adjustment and figuring out, well, what feels right on me, and we come back to this fabric table. So when I can feel the fabric and what it feels like on me, and I get into that sensation, then I'm no longer judging the visual. The visual comes next. You can't judge a feeling. A feeling just is of fabric. You can judge it in that you like it or you don't like it, but it's not a personal reflection of
no.
you. And then when you look at the aesthetic I find coming next is, oh yeah, and now how does it look? Of course it's a component, but I think we see lingerie in particular and fashion in particular as well, this immediate knee-jerk reaction as a self-reflection of truth. And it's not, it's more of an invitation to discover the senses.
Yeah.
I've already mentioned the fabric is probably one of your main inspirations and maybe where the designing a collection starts from. And you've mentioned color. And when I look at lingerie collections, I see a lot of color available, but I don't see a lot of color in women's lingerie drawers. Why do you think women are often reluctant to add color to the lingerie drawers?
Because I think color is not always easy when you think about what you're going to wear it with. That's what it comes down to. I think also lingerie, what we have to remember is there's it's a practical buy. It's a need. We women need lingerie for support, for because everyone wears knickers and bras, and so we tend to, I think, as women, we might be, it's going to be the color that's going to pull us into the store or make us want to go and touch the lingerie. But when we're going to have to pay for it, we'll often say, oh, well, maybe I should take it in black or white or skin colored because it will go with more things.
But do you think that reasoning is actually justified, or we've just decided that that's what truth is? I mean,
Oh, now that.
I'm wearing a completely black turtleneck and I could wear any color underneath me, as I see lots of women, and yet they're wearing these, safe, or this idea of being more practical, when in fact I could wear anything underneath. There's
Yeah.
sort of who said that color, it's interesting why we don't select more color.
Yeah, it's a very interesting subject, and it's something that, I mean, we've come up with this analysis, obviously, because it is basically the simple plain black, white skin, white not so much anymore, or ivory, but I mean, fashion colors, I think it's also must be a question of cost as well. Maybe it's easier to buy a fashion color in probably lingerie that's a little bit cheaper because it's more of an impulsive buy. So it's, as the French would say, un coup de cœur,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
which is something very difficult to translate into English, I find.
Well, I just know with the breast health charity that I'm part of, Pink Bra Bazaar, we do an annual bra toss. And in France, when women get together and toss their bras, the skies are filled with color. When my North American friends toss their bras, they're all beige. And sometimes they go out and buy bras to toss because they don't want to toss their beige bra. But which I find, okay, you don't want to toss it, but you're okay wearing it.
Yeah.
There's something there that's just sort of what we've already prejudged this going into the purchase. And I have this inkling that it comes to, I don't dare to, I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what to do with a color on me. I don't know what that means, So anyway, something to consider. And it's sort of something I'm sort of thinking about and observing, but it's not nothing color in lingerie. There's something very bold and daring about it that we aren't very comfortable with yet, I don't think. And Verity, what is your favorite color to wear underneath it all?
I have to say that I probably have two favourite colours. I'm not talking about black because for me it's not colour. Emerald green.
Mm.
I have a big thing about green, as most people that know me would say. And also, I love it's probably like a crimsony orange colour. Because I think it's such a beautiful colour. Red, I'm not so good with red on my skin tone. It needs to sort of come down a little bit, and so it goes more towards sort of a orangey red. So they're my probably two favourite colours.
Well, when we spoke several years ago, I don't know if you remember, but I asked you, what color would you like to see more of in the lingerie industry, or a color that you didn't necessarily think was being given its just due? And do you remember what you said? No,
Did I say green?
you did. You said green. And then suddenly, a year or two later, I started seeing much more green in the market. And it was interesting. And it was before the whole nature eco sustainability full vibe had come on. It was just, and I hadn't noticed there hadn't been any green. And now there is, and you're talking about emerald green. So
It's I think the dual colours in lingerie are lovely, are very rich, and I think the emerald green is can be flattering for a lot of people, and it's quite often misunderstood. I mean, it's I always laugh about it. My car is green. It's like British racing green, and for me, it's actually, I did have a green car when I was younger as well. And it's a colour that I think is extremely underestimated because it works really well it's very complementary to other colours. And it makes such a nice change from black all the time.
underestimated. That was the word I was thinking of. It's true. It wasn't underestimated. Now I do. I feel that it has a different, as you say, when you're feeling it, the color has a warm feel and strong. It is like a dark shade of an alternative to the black or the gray, and there's a richness to us. If you're enjoying this episode of Paris Undressed, you may also be interested in Storytime in Paris, hosted by Jennifer Garrity, who interviews contemporary authors with a French connection. Every episode includes a reading, so sit back in your armchair and tune into this page-turner podcast. Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. So I remember, I want to share this now with our listeners, when I barged into Verity's office one day, begging her to explain to me how all of these pieces fit together in the lingerie world to make a bra. And lace and embroidery was just such a mystery to me. And at the time, you were working for a brand called Implicit, and you redefined embroidery and lace for me when I asked about it. And you, because I sort of thought they were the same thing. There's some mesh. It all sort of looks like, there's more thread here and less thread there. And you were such a fan of embroidery because the lace making process, you needed so much time in advance to make that decision. And the embroidery was something that you could just add such graphic detail and graphic component to something and be able to make that decision much later in the process. Can you tell us, explain this difference between embroidery and lace and how you incorporate them into your designs now?
So embroidery is, in fact, it's where we will add stitches to a plain fabric or to a fabric, whether it's a mesh, a knit, or a woven fabric. In lingerie, we tend to do it on mesh or on knits. But it's where you can come and you make the design on the fabric by doing stitches. And obviously you have different amount of stitches, depending on your design, and you have different placements for the stitches. The world's your oyster. It just depends on how much you can pay for it. Lace is different in the sense that the machines that it's made on, they're going to make the base fabric, the background, and the design at the same time. So there's no base cloth that the design will be put onto. It's the looms and the threads that will actually make it all at once. And it's there's obviously technical constraints that we will have because of the type of machine that we'll use and the width. And it's also a question of the quality, but the delay for changing the machines and changing the design for lace is quite long, and obviously time consuming and costly for the lace companies. So I've always enjoyed working with embroidery. I mean, I love lace, but embroidery, I've always found that you can personalize it easier for a brand. So as we were at the time with Implicit, we were working on very graphic designs, and we said we wouldn't do flowers. So with embroidery, it was so much fun because you could change a design so quickly. And obviously we had price to respect with the brand, so you could work on the prices of the embroidery, and you could have something that could be stunning visually but very cost effective.
And just so the listeners know, it's not necessarily less expensive embroidery. It's two different options.
Oh, yes.
Right. So you have your choices in both components. It's not as if, oh, well, I'm going to go for embroidery because it's faster and cheaper. That's not the case at all. It's just
no, and it's not necessarily cheaper than lace.
No, exactly. And it feels almost a little bit more like a tattoo in a way.
Yeah.
It's a closer. I look at it differently now. I mean, the lace, as you say, you sort of wrapping yourself in a different sort of shadow and light experience. And with the embroidery, yeah, there's something much more connected to the skin. It connects you to your body a little bit.
Yeah, because I think a lot of embroidery in lingerie is on mesh fabric, so there's the transparency. So obviously it's as if your own body becomes the background for the design, so that's where you have a little bit the tattoo effect. So yeah, no, that's a good way to explain it. Yeah.
Another thing I get a lot of questions about, or there's quite a debate, is underwire versus no wire and wireless bras. And I get a lot of questions and opinions about underwires, and there is an increasing demand for wireless bras. So I have two questions. Is underwire really that uncomfortable?
No.
And two, can you get the same shape and support without underwire?
Okay, for the first question, underwires, no, are not uncomfortable. And this is very important for me because it's when you're wearing the right bra and you're wearing the right size and the style that suits you, it shouldn't be uncomfortable. I mean, it's when everyone was going through COVID and everyone was talking about the no bra, and because, coming home and being at home, there was no need to have the same shape, but also the bras are so uncomfortable. Personally, I've never had an uncomfortable bra because put it this way, if you have an uncomfortable bra, you don't wear it again. wearing a bra is the comfort of your bra. You put it on in the morning and you forget which one you're wearing, because that's when you're wearing the correct bra.
Always say that good lingerie moves with you.
Of course.
And the underwire brings us back to sort of what we're talking about with the production process. So when I hear things like, oh, well, the underwire comes out, and well, these are more choices that were made at the design manufacturing process, and how underwire is actually placed in the bra, how it's sewn in. These are not just sort of, not all underwire is the same. And there's round underwire and there's flat underwire, and there's different sizes in underwire, and how it's put in is part of this intricate process that, as you say, if it's not put in the right way, then it won't be comfortable. But it's not the underwire that's the problem.
That's uncomfortable. Yeah.
That's uncomfortable. Yeah. Okay.
But it's also related a lot to the size, because I mean, quite often you hear women saying, oh, well, it digs in at the front, or it's sticking in me at the side. Now, that all is through the fitting process, because in fact it's quite simple. If you take just an underwire in your hand, and what you have to remember in a bra is it's held in place by the centre front, and it's also held by the wing, the back. And so when you wear the bra, you're obviously pulling on the underwire, so to open it out a little bit. And so technically, if the pattern isn't made correctly, or the sewing process isn't respected with the measurements, and then you pull on the wire, obviously when you pull one in your hand, you'll see it will deform. It will obviously flip in at the front, or it to the side. It's, it's all about getting the correct tension on the fabric and on the underwire.
I've taken apart a lot of bras as I've tried to sort of, I've learned to sew by unsewing, let's say, on my seam ripper on other people's work. And I really just was one of those people that thought underwire was underwire, and, what's the difference? Well, when I started taking out hundreds of underwire and trying to unstitch the casing, really, there's casings that I don't need to unstitch because they just fall apart. And there's other ones where I really almost have to get a chainsaw to, and those underwires are not deformed in any way. I mean, it looks like I have a metal, a pile of deformity sometimes with these underwires. And so once I saw that, I'd be like, no, this is a big part of the design manufacturing process, and underwire is getting a bad rap.
Oh, it is definitely getting a bad rap, and there's been so much progress over the years in the quality. And as you say, it's the wire casing also that's important. It's, I think lingerie is so misunderstood because of technicity that goes into the products, and it's so important for that to be respected. So it's, lingerie is an investment piece, but we wear it for so much of our lives. So, I mean, it's like shoes. I often compare lingerie to shoes, because, we buy shoes, and we all have our shoes that are comfortable, and we have the shoes that are less comfortable. But, it's like sometimes, depending on what we're going to be doing in the day, we choose our shoes to be adapted to that. And I think we do the same thing with our lingerie.
And so about the shape and support without underwire,
Mm.
what's that all about, and is it true?
It really depends, I think, on the structure of the bra. If we talk about the bralettes and the crop tops today, I think there has been progress with certain brands. I mean, I know Triumph, technically they do some fabulous things, and they're very advanced with the soft cut bras and things. I personally find that with other brands, when you're buying a bralette, I don't have the same support at the end of the day. If you're going to go for a wireless bra or a soft cut bra and you want that support, you need to have a certain structure in the bra, which, whether it's made with, fabric inserts, or whether it's made with laminated inserts and things. But that's personal.
Well, the options are out there, And again, it's more when I think about color and the choices, we sort of have this idea that the underwire is just something we don't want anymore, and maybe just look at why we think we don't need it. And it's and bringing the appreciation to, if you're listening right now, just pull a bra out of your drawer and just look and see how that underwire has been put in. And so before making a categorical judgment about this doesn't, just bringing an appreciation for when it can be done differently and it can be done well. Where do you see innovation within the industry, and what are some examples?
Innovation today, I think, has come through the fabrics. Obviously, there's all the recycled polyesters, polyamides are being used in the fabrics today, with fabrics being biodegradable, with brands working on products that are completely sort of biodegradable. I mean, notably Chantel, who have done Chantel 1, I think it is. But, fabulous product. And that's where companies are obviously going to be moving towards. Innovation, there's a supplier that I love working with, because innovation with the laminating that they do with the laser work.
What does that mean, laminating?
Laminating is where it's where they will put, it's as if they glue a couple of different fabrics together, and that gives a better support, but it also enables you to do cleaner finishes on products, so that you don't have necessarily the thickness of the elastic and things like that. And so Art Martin, a French company who are based near Lyon, they do some fabulous things creatively wise. And but I think it's big steps that we're going towards with the more responsible fabrics, definitely, which is proving difficult for, I think, the supply chains, unfortunately.
But you see real movement towards an effort and
Yes.
concrete, more than just blah blah in meetings.
Yeah, no. It's definitely, and it's become something that's highly important for all brands today. And I think lingerie even more so, because it's worn so close to the body, that there needs to be, obviously, how can I say, the companies really need to talk about this, and a lot of them are, and they're doing it, and they're doing it well. We could probably do more, because unfortunately, even though we talk about being biodegradable or being eco-responsable, all these type of things, we're still over-consuming.
Yes, and that's a big part of. I mean, before we start blaming others, but what they're doing to make the clothes, we can also make big changes and choices in how we purchase it as well. So it's not just a one way. It's just not a one way street. What has making lingerie taught you about your own femininity and sensuality?
That I think women, we as a woman, we have different feelings, different days, and that our lingerie can adapt to it. And that's what we're lucky. Actually, we're very lucky compared to men, because men, it's, are pretty basic down there. They don't have much choice. But we can wear the simple, comfortable things. We can put the lace on. We can put the embroidery. We can, it's a fashion accessory. Lingerie is no longer just the lingerie basics, even though obviously there's a functional side to the product. But we can play with it, and it is a true accessory to our wardrobes today.
If you're enjoying this episode of Paris Undressed, you may also be interested in Don't Miss This, hosted by Jennifer Garrity, who finds those off the beaten path experiences and hidden gems that can make for a truly unique Parisian experience. She rounds up the best of what's happening in the City of Light. So tune into this exciting Who, What, and Where podcast. Don't miss this. Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. And have you seen your lingerie style change over the years in your own personal drawer?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think also with working for the brands that I've worked for, you evolve with that as well, and it's interesting is that I think you have preconceived views and rules to respect, and also with maturity, you get to a certain age where you think, well, yeah, I can wear that. I'm allowed to.
I think of lingerie drawers as a place sometimes where we go to with such habits. It's a little bit, I think of the hairdresser when I'm afraid to try a new hairstyle. And sometimes I just go and say, well, what do you see? What would you do? And just having that a different perspective changes how you see yourself. And because you wouldn't have noticed that. And so it's an invitation, we all have things we think work for us and they do. But maybe just go to a store and without asking for something you think you want or need, ask somebody a more open question and see what they offer.
Yeah.
And then see what your reaction to it is. You might surprise yourself because the routine happens subtly and quickly in our habits. And then it's just kind of there, and we haven't paid attention to what's in the drawer and we're putting on. And as you say, there's an emotional experience to the fabric, whether we understand it or not. And
Yeah.
so if we're putting on just the same old, well, guess how you feel? The same old.
But no, you're so true. That's so true.
And just to shake it up a little bit. And that doesn't mean you need to go off and suddenly get dramatic and change your whole personality, but just perhaps invite well, what would you
Yeah.
suggest if, what do you like? I mean, I just say, well, what do you like to a salesperson?
But that's really interesting because it's something that even I've never really done. And it's, I think I'll try that.
Yeah. You go in with your criteria and I'm sort of hell-bent for I'm going to get this and this and this price and this color and this. It's like, just doesn't mean you have to buy it. Just just try it on and you might be sort of surprised at the result.
But is doing it as we do in a way? Maybe we shop like that because of we don't have a lot of time. It's we go in with a mission, and
We go
it's
in with a
like,
mission.
and well, I know what suits me. It's always that sort of attitude, and sometimes it's we need to take the time, I think, to go out with an open mind and say, okay, this is my day, maybe, where someone can suggest things to me.
Suggest, and as you said, I go in with I know what suits me. What came to mind right away, too, was I know what doesn't, and then we've already closed so many doors. How do we know that? How do we know that right away? So just before you can certainly know what suits you once you've tried it on, but maybe you said it a bit too soon. And maybe there's something out there that suits you as our bodies change, as our styles change, and we just haven't given ourselves the time and the space to try something on. So it's a little bit like going in front of these beautiful patisserie windows and just picking, well, what today? It's not going to dramatically, it's not a life and death situation. You can actually play with it, as you say, play with it
Yeah.
and play with what your emotions can invite, what you can invite through lingerie as new emotions. Is it possible that a lingerie designer has bad underwear days?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, I could share something quite intimate. Sometimes my husband says to me, have you seen what you're wearing? You're supposed to be a lingerie designer. And I'd sometimes say to him, yeah, but what you don't understand is I did go to the office this morning wearing a matching set, but because I was given so many things I had to try on and I have to do a wearer test, and, that I've already changed 3 times today. So,
This beautiful word in French, dépareiller.
yeah.
Where do you sit on the dépareiller range? And can you explain it?
I just think it's I don't have a problem with it. Obviously, we all dream to have the matching set with the tops and the bottoms in the same colour and the same fabric. De Perrier, I tend to do it, but I tend to stick to the same colour. I might not have the black bottoms that match the black bra in the fabrics, but they will be in the same color. But that's, but then sometimes what happens when you're wearing dark bottoms and a light top, or vice versa, is more common. It's you adapt to your clothes. But but there's nothing quite like that feeling where you wear that matching set.
It does bring your body
Oh,
together.
completely.
It sort of resembles energies a little bit. There is something quite unique about
Yes.
that feeling of the matching top and the bottom.
And it's that little thing I always think that personally, nobody else knows, but it's that sort of superpower,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's your lucky charm of the day.
In Paris, we have lots of choices. I'm moving to food now. I'm moving to food, but it's also a way of describing food I hear a lot in lingerie, and that's salé sucré.
Yes.
There's been quite a few collections that have been named salé sucré, sort of salt or sugar. So let me ask you, salé sucré in lingerie and salé sucré in your food choices. What's your preference?
Gosh. Well, I'm a very, how can I say, I much prefer, savory, silly food. I'm not a big sugar fan. And what would you like to know? Which restaurants or what type of foods?
Possibly what type of food? If you're savory, if
Yeah,
there's, is it, yeah, what would your go-to
my go-to,
savory treat be?
uh, is terrible. I would probably say crisps,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I think it's something that I always have at home.
Well, food descriptions are quite prevalent in the lingerie world. That's how I learned quite a bit of vocabulary in the early days. Are the descriptions that you find on menus? You often find in the descriptions
Of
of
lingerie.
lingerie. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, because we talk about piquant, we talk
Yep.
about it being sweet, and
Yes.
yeah,
Acidulé,
yes,
les douceurs.
yeah,
Les douceurs d'été,
yeah,
there's this invitation to the senses, which the French, I don't read the same descriptions in English as I do in French. It's not the same description.
no,
There's quite a link between the menus in France and the way they describe the experience about what you're going to experience. And that's more adopted in the lingerie descriptions in France too. This is the experience you're invited to feel. If you were not making beautiful lingerie, or when you're not making beautiful lingerie, what do you like to do?
What do I like to do? I like. I think if I hadn't have done lingerie design, I probably would have done shoe design. But when I'm not doing lingerie, what I love to do is I'm a big music fan. I love all types of music because I think it's also something that plays with your emotions as well. You know, you listen to a song, it gives you emotions. It's it makes you happy, makes you sad, melancholic, all those types of things. I'm also a big Pilates fan, so which keeps me sane, and so that I think that's helped me over the years, throughout the years, keep my sanity, and for health reasons as well. I think I've just always been in lingerie, so I've never really thought about doing anything else.
Yeah, it's your passion.
Yes.
It's what you love to do and you love to make. So you're just always making.
Yeah.
Lovely. And what are you curious about right now?
I'm curious. I think about where we're going to go with the textile business. Curious and a little bit worried because
Mm,
obviously what we discussed earlier with the need to be more ecologically responsible. And I think it's a big question mark for brands in the quantities that they produce. That's for me, I'm curious to see where we will go and how we're going to be able to react and adjust for the future.
Well, thank you, Verity, for joining me today and for helping us feel better about ourselves and contributing to these steps that we need to take to make the world and our place in it just feel a bit more balanced.
Thank you, Catherine. It was lovely. I really enjoyed it. Lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Merci for listening to Paris Undressed. And if you enjoy this podcast, please share and subscribe so we can continue to connect our stories one bra at a time. You can find me, your host, Kate Kemp Griffin, on all socials at Paris Undressed. That's PARISUNDRESSED, and at Catherine Kemp Griffin. That's KATHRYNKEMPGRIFFIN. You can also find the links on our episode page. Paris Undressed is produced by Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please go to parisundergroundradio.com. Merci et à la prochaine.
This episode of Paris Undressed was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.